I write to you from Texas. I was born in the United States, but I barely lived here for the first 6 years of my life because my family always lived in Mexico. I've been working in household cleaning for 4 years. My routine was to bring a playlist on my phone and listen to the same songs while I worked, since in most of the houses the owners were never there or arrived when I left. One day my phone company gave me unlimited data and I started listening to music and stories online. As podcasts, audiobooks, and short horror stories became more popular, I had even more options to listen to while I worked. I've always been attracted to the paranormal. Since I was a child I've had strange experiences, but people made fun of me or dismissed me, so I kept quiet. A friend and I like to talk about these things, although she says she has never gone through anything like I have. When I started listening to those stories while I worked, I began to experience odd things in the houses where I clean. I heard someone call my name. I saw people who would vanish when I looked. And there was a black dog that kept appearing in several of the houses I work in. One morning I arrived at a house where the owner's children usually made a huge mess, and I found their room completely tidy. I was relieved because it meant I'd finish earlier. I closed the door and continued cleaning the rest of the house. I usually leave around 11:30, since I start at 7. Later that afternoon, around 2, the lady of the house called me and asked why I'd left the children's room so messy. I was stunned. I thought she must have meant I hadn't vacuumed or had left some drawer open because I swore I had cleaned that room. I apologized and the next day I went first into that room and found clothes scattered all over, sheets and notebooks on the floor, and objects out of place. I thought the boys had come home and messed it up again. But before I left that day, the lady came and told me, "Yesterday you forgot to clean my children's room, and you also forgot to turn off the kitchen faucet." I was sure I had checked everything before leaving. I didn't want to argue, so I apologized. She replied in an annoyed tone, "Okay, but don't repeat it. And since you're going to clean my children's room, it will be less of a burden, since they don't return until Saturday." It surprised me even more because it was still Tuesday. I asked if they really weren't coming back yet. She said no, they weren't. That left me with a lot of doubts. Around the same time, in another house while I was cleaning upstairs, I almost by accident saw a black dog sitting in the middle of the patio. That house had no pets. The dog shouldn't have been there. I went down and looked for him, but he was gone. I searched everywhere, trying to find where he could have hidden or if he'd left the property. I was a little scared, but I convinced myself it was a neighbor's dog since yards there are only partially separated. When I was about to leave that house, still listening to the stories on my phone, I saw the dog again by the stairs, sitting without moving. I got so scared I locked myself in the laundry room and called the owners. They told me not to move and that they'd be there soon. After about 20 minutes they arrived, checked the entire house and the security cameras, and found nothing. In none of the recordings did anything or anyone appear besides me. I felt embarrassed and thought I was going crazy for listening to those stories. I kept seeing that dog for 5 or 6 more days in different houses and different spots. I tried to ignore it, and it helped that the dog never moved when I saw him. Each time I saw him I began to remember things from my childhood. I'm 26 now. I was born in Las Cruces, New Mexico, in December 1995, but my parents were from Durango. In 1994, they had crossed into the United States. I was born there while they worked on a ranch, but they were later deported while working. An aunt took care of me for a while. When I was 7 months old, they took me back to Durango. Life there was hard, so my parents started working in the Triángulo Dorado, the poppy fields in the mountains between Durango, Sinaloa, and Chihuahua. My dad worked in the fields and my mom cooked and helped as she could. I remember people coming with their eyes covered and hands tied, taken into the mountains and never returning. The black dog I'm telling you about appeared in those poppy fields and sometimes in the small wooden room where we lived. It was common to see figures in the fields who would seem to call me, and when I approached they would disappear. In the rainy season, one heard a woman wailing with a horrible, painful sigh. Her laments traveled across the poppy fields. When I told my mother about these things, she would tell me I shouldn't pay attention, but I never got used to them. In 2008, the military and federal forces began destroying the crops. My dad left the fields and we moved to Ciudad Juárez to be with relatives. Some of them were policemen, so my parents thought we'd be safer. For a while things seemed to improve, but then other strange things started to happen. I began to see a shadow in the house, a silhouette like someone wearing a cape and a hat. Sometimes I slept on my parents' bed and felt it nearby. When my dad came home in his car, I'd sometimes see as if someone else was sitting in the back seat, but when I walked to the car the shadow vanished. For my mom's birthday we had a small barbecue late at night. Around 2 in the morning I watched from inside as she was outside and seemed to be accompanied by someone in every movement. When she came in I asked who had been with her and she said no one, everyone had left an hour earlier. I didn't tell her what I had seen. A few days later we went to the movies. I went to the candy stand and, just before the film started, I saw in the seat next to my mom what looked like that same shadow. When I returned there was no one in the seat. My mom asked me to sit close because she was cold and rubbed her arms. That night my dad drank late and told me he loved me and was sorry for the life he'd given us. I told him nothing mattered now that we were together. The next day, while I was bathing, I heard a very loud noise outside. I dried off and ran out to find my parents' bedroom mirror completely shattered, as if someone had thrown a stone, but there was no stone or any clue on the floor. 4 days after my mom's birthday, on Thursday, July 15, 2010, my parents were attacked by gunfire and no one came to help. That same day there had been a car bomb aimed at a federal patrol nearby. I don't remember everything clearly. When I reached the scene and found my parents in their damaged car, they were still alive but dying. I stayed with them until they passed away from the bleeding. While I was in the car I remember seeing that shadow standing across the street, watching us. After that night I never saw it again. I went through a lot. Therapy, living with relatives. I stayed with my father's aunt in Las Cruces, later with my maternal grandmother in Los Mochis, and now I live in Amarillo, Texas. Over the years I have seen my parents' graves and places tied to my past. When I was 20 I visited a woman who practiced witchcraft. She told me I had a special gift, that I could communicate with beings from another dimension if I developed it. I had only gone to see if my parents wanted to tell me something, and I wasn't interested in contacting anything, so I stopped pursuing that. I have had other strange things happen since, but I do what my mother once told me: keep them to myself. I hadn't seen that dog for more than 13 years until I started listening to those stories while I cleaned. Hearing them seemed to unlock old memories. Have you ever experienced something that appeared repeatedly and only later took on meaning, or continued without an answer?